WADR, promoting dialogue.
Many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online on WADR.org. This is Newslink. First, the headlines. Burkina Faso adopts a new decree on general mobilization to combat terrorism. The Nigerian army neutralizes over a dozen terrorists, including the top commander of a notorious bandit group in Zamfara State. And Ghana becomes the first country in the world to approve Oxford University's new malaria vaccine for children. Please stay with us for details of this and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. The Burkina government has recently taken a significant step toward combating terrorism by adopting a decree on general mobilization. This new decree aims to provide a legal framework for all actions to be engaged to address the security challenges faced by the country. Before this adoption, President of Transition, Captain Ibrahim Traore, had obtained the approval of the Constitutional Council in late December 2022. Taufik Abdel Nasser has more details in this report by WADR's Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou.
Adopted during a Council of Ministers meeting on Thursday, the decree aims to provide the necessary means to deal with the security crisis in the country. The Minister of National Defense, Colonel Major Kassoum Coulibaly, stated that a national awakening is necessary to find a solution to the security situation facing Burkina Faso. The decree provides a legal framework for all actions to be taken against armed terrorist groups. The Burkinabe state can now request people, goods, and services subject to resources to control and distribution for supply and impose necessary obligations on natural or legal persons in their property. The state also has the right to call for defense employment, either individually or collectively. The Burkinabe executive has recently taken several measures to combat terrorism, including the adoption of a draft law by the Transitional Legislative Assembly on watchdog and development committees. These committees, installed mainly in rural areas, serve as an intelligence and alert circuit for the defense and security forces.
Taufik Abdel Nasser with that report filed by WADR's Martin Kaba in Ouagadougou. More on security matters in the Sahel. Suspected terrorists in a series of attacks killed at least 7 people in the central and southern regions of Mali. Several others were injured during these attacks. According to media reports, among the victims were 2 police officers and a Ghanaian driver. The heavily armed assailants on motorcycles raided the Here-Makono border post in Sikasso region near Burkina Faso overnight from Wednesday to Thursday, setting both the customs and police posts on fire. Imo Edit completes the story.
The attack resulted in 2 deaths, including a policeman and a Ghanaian driver, with another injured policeman and 2 other civilians, including a Burkinabe. Police sources confirmed the toll and attributed the attack to armed men in vehicles and motorcycles. The attackers were found to be carrying war equipment, including 8 submachine guns, a semi-automatic pistol, and a PKM. Meanwhile, in the circle of the Bankas region of Mopti in central Mali, unidentified armed men attacked and set fire to the Customs and National Guard premises, as confirmed by security sources. 2 other attacks occurred in the same region. The village of Sagarin was attacked by several armed men on motorcycles, while the village of Njan Oikoro was also attacked. The communal authorities reported 5 deaths and material damage. Insecurity has plagued Mali since 2012, primarily due to terrorist attacks and community conflicts. Despite the deployment of foreign, national and international forces, the situation remains unstable.
Imo Edit filed that report. The Nigerian army on Thursday announced that it neutralized more than a dozen terrorists affiliated with notorious bandit leader Dan Karami. The operation, led by troops of Operation Hadarin Daji, resulted in casualties including Jafar, Dan Karami's top commander. The militants had pledged their allegiance to Dan Karami and attempted to launch an attack on 2 communities in the Birnin Magaji local government area of the state on Wednesday. However, the troops, with the help of local vigilantes, successfully repelled the assault. Our Abuja correspondent Usman Umar has more in this report.
Local media sources reported that a large group of bandits were conducting a burial of their deceased members at a graveyard in Maitaba village under the Zurumi local government area of the state. The Kirifada community resident, who spoke on the condition of anonymity, reveals that the bandits had launched an attack on the communities on Wednesday. The incident led to the death of 15 terrorists as troops were quickly mobilized to engage the bandits. The source added that an unspecified number of bandits, including top fighters, Freezer and Nosulhu, were also wounded during the shootout. Unfortunately, the exchange of gunfire left 2 soldiers and 4 local vigilante members injured to varying degrees. Meanwhile, the army authorities have confirmed that the troops successfully rescued some commuters who were abandoned by the bandits after a fierce firefight. During a routine patrol, the troops received intelligence about bandits who were blocking the Dambasa-Bini road to kidnap commuters. The security operatives immediately moved to the location and engaged the bandits, neutralizing 2 of them while others managed to flee. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Guinean Minister of Justice, Alphonse Wright, has expressed displeasure over a recent meeting between the Prime Minister and the country's magistrates. In a communique, the minister denounced the meeting and threatened to take disciplinary action against any magistrate who shares information about legal proceedings with a member of the executive. With legal experts have welcomed the statement, some political figures have criticized the minister's actions, accusing him of holding judicial cases involving socio-political actors hostage. WADR's Terno Alpha Ibrahima Balde in Conakry has more details in this report, voiced in our studios by Oge Berika.
The Prime Minister recently met with prosecutors handling the cases of several socio-political actors who are either detained or under judicial control. This was done in order to fulfill the conditions of the opposition coalition, who are engaged in dialogue with the government and are calling for the dropping of charges against these individuals. The Minister of Justice, Alphonse Charles Wright, has emphasized that there will be no violation of criminal procedure and has warned magistrates against sharing information on these cases with members of the executive.
The law states that it is not up to the Prime Minister, nor the President of the Republic, nor any other member of the government except the Minister of Justice, keeper of the seals, to talk to the prosecutors about the case in progress. It should be noted that if the magistrates of the seats are independent, the prosecutors are autonomous, but report to the Minister of Justice, keeper of the seals, who can order them to carry out prosecution or give instructions on the criminal police of the government. So the Ministry of Justice has every right to object to this behavior, which does not deserve to happen in a society where the law is respected.
However, members of the opposition are urging the Minister of Justice to reconsider his position.
Minister Krayes must reconsider, because where was he when the home of Sidia and Selu were robbed by ORCND? The Minister Krayes is where, while the justice is unable to decide the case of Fonike, who is incarcerated for a year now. The Minister Krayes is where in the case Kasoli and C, knowing well that it does not concern judicial files, but rather files filed with a political connection. Why not execute it as you do not ask the magistrate not to give them instructions?
It is worth noting that the former Minister of Justice was dismissed after speaking out against presidential interference in judicial matters during the military regime.
That report was filed by our Conakry correspondent Terno Alpha Ibrahima Balde and voiced in our studios by Oge Obi Erika. Let's turn our attention to Ghana as the country becomes the first in the world to approve a new malaria vaccine developed by Oxford University. This breakthrough vaccine is expected to benefit children under the age of 3 who are at high risk of contracting the mosquito-borne disease. malaria claims the lives of over 600,000 people annually, with the majority being children in Africa, and scientists have been working for years to develop effective vaccines. However, it remains unclear when the Oxford vaccine will be made available in the country. James Japan reports.
During an investor's presentation
in Africa, childhood vaccines are typically financed by the international organizations like Gavi and UNICEF, following approval from the World Health Organization for safety and effectiveness. However, Oxford scientist Adrian Hill announced that Ghana's drug regulator has approved the malaria vaccine for children aged 5 to 36 months who are at the highest risk of death from the disease. This is the first time a major vaccine has been approved first in an African country ahead of wealthy nations. The Serum Institute of India has a deal to produce up to 200 million doses annually. Hill noted that it was unusual for an African regulatory authority to review the data faster than the WHO. Mosquirix, the first malaria vaccine, was endorsed by the WHO last year, but insufficient funding and commercial potential hampered the capacity of the manufacturer, British drug maker GSK, to produce as many doses as needed. GSK has pledged to produce up to 50 million doses of Mosquirix every year through 2028, a small fraction of the roughly 100 million doses a year of the 4-dose vaccine required to cover around 25 million children in the long run. Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi participated in a pilot program for the rollout of Mosquirix and have recently begun expanding its use.
James Japan with that report. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Burkina Faso adopts a new decree on general mobilization to combat terrorism. The Nigerian army neutralizes over a dozen terrorists, including the top commander of a notorious bandit group in Zamfara State. Ghana becomes the first country in the world to approve Oxford University's new malaria vaccine for children. Ahead in the news, we have the Street Parliament, press review, and sports update. Stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
Remember, we're streaming live on WADR.org and live on Facebook on West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. In other news from Ghana, the government has announced that the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is expected to approve a program for the country by the end of May 2023. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, stated on Thursday that Ghana has made significant progress and therefore calls for a need for swift approval of the program. The IMF has given assurances that it will act promptly to approve Ghana's program requests once a deal is reached with its creditors. WADR's Accra correspondent Timbila Lawson reports.
During an investors' presentation forum by the Republic of Ghana, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta urged external creditors to support Ghana's efforts in securing the program, emphasizing that access to the international capital market is crucial for restoring macroeconomic stability. He also assured fair debt treatment with the commercial creditors and expected an IMF board approval for a program by May 2023.
Two key conditions for the IMF board to approve the program and proceed with the much-needed financial disbursement under an extended credit facility. This will require, among other targets, bringing the ratio of the present value of our total public debt to GDP to 55% by 2028 and bringing our external debt service to revenue ratio below 18% from 2028. This will also require securing enough financial assistance from our development partners to meet our gross financing needs over the period of the program. This will be of paramount importance to ensure that the IMF program is fully funded.
In a related development, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, confirmed during a launch of the IMF MD's Global Policy Agenda in Washington, D.C., that the fund would promptly approve Ghana's program request as soon as a deal is reached with its creditors. She encouraged Ghanaians to remain positive about the country's program request, as swift action would be taken soon.
A country that has long track record of sound macroeconomic management ought to be supported to return to markets. So our program is a bridge for Ghana, and to tell you the truth, I'm actually quite optimistic. I think Ghana is going to move. The creditors are going to move, and we are going to move swiftly. So I guess the short answer to you is stay tuned and stay positive.
Meanwhile, a high-level delegation from Ghana led by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta and the Bank of Ghana Governor Dr. Ernest Addison is currently attending the World Bank and IMF spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Reporting for Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Mbila Lawson in Accra.
Street Parliament this week takes us to Liberia, where public debates are emerging on whether or not the ruling government deserves a second mandate as the country prepares for its presidential and general elections on October 10, 2023. Our Monrovia correspondent, Daliton Pauper, caught up with some supporters of the opposition and those of the ruling party to discuss their views on this interesting topic. Take a listen.
The October 2023 elections have been a major talking point among Liberians since the start of the voter registration exercise that began a week ago. In our interaction, Ellis Wilson and others supporting the opposition community insist that the George Weah-led administration has not done enough, let alone demand a second term. They cited the widespread public corruption, lack of security, increase in the number of secret killings, and increase in the public wage bill as justification for their arguments.
And remain negative that the country is not progressing under President Weah. What is my reliance and where do I stand? If you measure government performance, more especially with global indicators, with Africa indicators, the best way to measure government performance, one, we start with the economy, start with job creation. In our policy document, they say every year, the purple agenda for prosperity and development will create 500,000 jobs and will offer it to the youth. That's the first measurement about their failure. Today, if you read the global indicator on poverty, we are much more poorer today than yesterday. Opportunities are not created by the government. They took their country with 900 million in public debt. Today, we have more than 2.1 billion in public debt. Do the math.
But Vani Fambule, a supporter of the ruling government, insists much more has been achieved by the Weah presidency. Fambule went on to say the current administration should be allowed another 6-year term to finish what they started.
We are here today not with prejudice, but we are here with truth and fights that will convince each and every Liberian citizens to re-elect President Weah for the second term. Let's look at the sector of education. Under this Weah government, the sector of education is booming. That's the only government that pays WAS fees for the past 5 years. Free tuition at the state-run universities. We look at road. They argue that the health sector is not working, but we can tell you that if the health sector was not working, the political godfather that they call Joseph Boakai stay in Liberia and attend health services in this country. It's a clear indication that the health sector of this country is working. Because he never left Liberia, he stayed in Liberia and he turned up to Liberia. These are some of the precedents that we're telling you that George Weah is working. And let's look at the sector of peace. Under the Weah government, we gave authority to freedom of movement. The government also came up with a program that they call temporary youth empowerment. Under Ministry of Youth and Sport, that the government used more than even $30 million for the son dwellers. A son who came from West Point to have food on his table. Today, Ministry of Youth and Sport have gave opportunities to youth, more than 8,000 youth under the George Weah government, getting paid on Monday's salary on the support and the watchful eye of this government.
As we conclude the debate, the two sides state their reasons why they insist on maintaining their positions ahead of the elections.
It's an indication and clear manifestation that there is peace and harmony That's the reason why we have a society where we discuss the issues, we will not bring brutality to the discourse.
And there's the reason after October 10th, we will launch investigation and prosecute people in this country. Besides that, to talk about wage bill. Who increased the wage bill? When people are not qualified and you put them on the wage bill, you increase salary, you increase public spending. There's law that you should maintain it, man. The people are suffering and the government living life. See the current budget. See the land ministry budget. Yes, they said the government was broke then, but they were living life. So that's why we call it on you that we should not maintain this government. We should not renew President Weah's mandate and let's give them one blow. Thank you.
So we are here, we maintain, we repeat. We are anticipating a one-round victory. The developments are all on the walls in block letters. Seditionists are going to march to the pools and vote President Weah on the basis of their development. Thank you very much.
October 10 is a judgment day in this country.
WADR's Darlington Popper there with the street parliament.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
This week, two major events took place in the Gambia. First was the presentation of the report by the investigative task force set up by the government to dig deep into the acute kidney injury, or AKI, that killed over 70 children after they consumed contaminated cough syrups imported from India. Second was the commissioning of a fleet of 70 buses by President Adama Barrow to improve the public transport sector rather. But what other developing and trending stories are on the front of the national dailies? Sampli Jankwembanjo takes us through.
Today, we begin this press review with the Point newspaper, whose lead story reads, UDP condemns alleged vote buying by NPP. Because UDP is the leading opposition party, and they condemn reports that the ruling National People's Party are buying votes ahead of the local government elections. This other photo reads, Attorney General clarifies IEC chairman's term. A CSO alleged that the current IEC chairman should have been out of office because his term has ended. However, the Attorney General has clarified, saying that in fact his term will end in 2025. British High Commissioner aids National Human Rights Commission with items worth $9.4 million. That's another report. And this one reads, Minister Juve, Senegalese counterpart, hold trade talks. Barrow applauds late Vice President for new buses. During the commissioning of 70 new buses, the Gambian leader hailed the role played by former Vice President Aliou Badara Diouf in purchasing the buses. University of the Gambia tasked to present report on grade finding allegations. Let's move on to the Standard newspaper. And unsurprisingly, their lead story has to do with allegations of voter buying by the ruling National People's Party, and it reads, NPP denies vote buying after ward chairman is reported to pleas for alleged vote buying. This other story reads, population and housing census rescheduled. Court heard man connived with Marabo to defraud intending traveler. Serekunda National Assembly member wants NAWEC headquarters moved from Westfield. NCP diaspora mobilizer endorses Ahmad Jite. Let's move on to the Voice newspaper, whose lead story reads, Ex-Raudatul Majalis president urges businessmen to de-escalate prices of essential commodities. Local government election is not an ordinary election, according to Honorable Halifa Salah, the former presidential candidate for PDOIS in the 2021 presidential elections. And this one reads, UDP frowns at IEC on failure to take step over NPP election fraud. Let's take a look at the final newspaper for today, and it is the Fourier newspaper, and the lead story reads, PDOIS will be promoting the code of conduct on campaign ethics, according to Halifa Salah. Management of Star FM radio refute nurses, midwives allegations. And finally, this one reads, Ministry of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology reacts to alleged UTG sex for grades scandal. These are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies, and it is back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Sankule Janko. And in the world of sports, Bayern Munich has dropped Sadio Mane from their squad ahead of their Bundesliga game against Hoffenheim after reportedly punching teammate Leroy Sané after Tuesday's Champions League loss to Manchester City. The Senegalese international has also been handed a ban for his action. A statement issued by Bayern on Thursday says Sadio Mane, 31, will not be included in the FC Bayern squad for this Saturday's home match against 1899 Hoffenheim. This is due to his misconduct after Bayern's Champions League match at Manchester City. Mane will also be given a fine, the club said in a brief statement. The reigning African Player of the Year was also forced to apologize in front of his teammates. Sadio Mane joined Bayern in June 2022 from Liverpool, where he won the Premier League and Champions League. He had a good start in Bayern, scoring 11 goals in 32 games, but this was disrupted by an injury he sustained in November last year. The injury forced the Senegalese forward to miss the World Cup and has not scored for Bayern since returning from the injury. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio and broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM Banjul, and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lufa County, and in Ghana on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been on the console, and Mustafa Sek is managing the social media feed. Do interact with us via social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio, English service, and stream live on WADR.org. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
News, talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar.